Lokati here. Today we're going to go over an arc witch that I think would make Enkei very happy. This is a very high cast rate, very high damage hit-based arc witch that is based around full elemental conversion and Doryanis. Now we are going purity of ice instead of purity of fire. That has some inherent downsides of itself because we're splitting damage between chaos and elemental instead of dumping it all into fire. But it comes at the positive side of being a 20 div budget jewel instead of a mirror plus budget jewel. So let's take a look at some mapping and some bossing. Would rather have Progenesis equipped than a random basalt flask, but it's for the budgets. Oh, my shrines. I want to click shrines. Those guys like spawned up out of the ground and prevented me from frost blinking. I've never seen that before. Boom. Now let's take a look at the POE. We're going to have this broken up into a mid-budget and a current in-game character. Now, I put the current in-game character together for just short of 50 div. I would anticipate you're probably going to spend somewhere between 30 and 100 div to get it put together, depending on how much you want to push it and what is just available on the market, how lucky you are in crafting, things like that. So we'll look at mid-budget first. We'll go over items. Items for this build are hyper specific, so you have to pay close attention to the items in the build. For one, we have a main hand wand, which is a crit chance wand, and then we have an offhand wand, which is a crit multi wand. So make sure you do differentiate those two. Ideally on your wand, you're going to have cast speed plus to lightning spell skill gems, increase spell or increase lightning damage, and then plus lightning damage to spells. If you want to go a little bit more high budget, you can get a +1/+1 with increased spell or lightning damage on the prefixes. And then again, cast speed, crit chance, and crit multi on the suffixes. And then double crit multi cast speed on your offhand wand. For our helmet slot, we are going with the Sandstorm Visage. This could be +2 aura, +2 AoE, or +2 cold. The +2 colds are just cheaper and much more common. For our body armor, we want to run a Doryani's prototype with +2 socketed duration gems. If you can get a +2/+1, that would be even better. Ideally, with very good max life roll on this, because we do need a lot of life for the build. For our gloves, we're going to run an aspect of the spider gloves with chaos res and attributes, potentially on the suffixes, and then life and armor on the prefixes. Now I want to point out something here. There's a lot of finagling between attributes and resistances and things on the build, and so you can do things differently depending on what gear you have access to. And we'll talk about that when we look over my gear and how I got to the necessary stats. And then on our boots, we are running max life, ideally chaos res, regen, and an essence avoid being shocked on the boots, as well as much armor as we can. For our eater and exarch mods, we're running lightning damage leech and unnerve, and increased action speed, and either life regeneration rate or regenerate per endurance charge. For our amulet, we are running a replica Dragon's Fang's Flight with +3 levels to arc. There are many options for this amulet. You could run a +1 all spell skills, +1 lightning spell skills with crit multi on it. That would be just as good. But we have a need for increased reservation efficiency, and items and gems have 10% reduced attribute requirements. Now, if your attributes are overcapped, you don't need a high roll on the attribute requirements. But you do have to have enough increased reservation efficiency of skills in order to maintain an overleech situation on your unreserved life. So you can see right here at 7%, that does not cut it any longer. You have to have one that has at least 9% so that you can have your unreserved life being sufficient. And so you'll see the difference here. If we can click on the right one, you can see the difference here. Your unreserved life and your life recoverable are going to need to be different numbers. This allows it so that while you leech, you can overleech and you don't drop your leech stacks, which is very important for recovery. So you need a minimum of, I believe, 9% on this replica Dragon Fang's Flight in order to maintain that layer of defense. And so we'll take a look at this one. We'll edit it up to 9%. And that'll be sufficient. Maybe an 8% could do it, but obviously a 7% couldn't. Outside of that, we do want max roll all attributes. You can bless it or ball these unless it's corrupted, and so that makes it very simple to get a hold of. For our ring, ideally, we want a ring with positive chaos res, negative lightning res, and positive damage recoup. Now you can make these or you can buy these. There are going to be 1 million of these rings for sale on the market, different positive and different negative attributes depending on what it has. But the damage recoup is critical for the defenses on the build. The negative lightning res is critical for your offensive on the build. And then the chaos res gives you much more flexibility in the rest of your gear. If you don't have the chaos res on the amethyst ring, you can drop the silver flask. You can run an amethyst flask instead. And so you do have options there. Obviously, we want to either get a second comparable ring or a second better ring or something. Maybe you get one ring that has negative lightning res and 60% chaos res, and you get another ring that just has negative lightning res on it. If you have the perfect ring to touch, then you can just use Calandras to reflect it. For our belts, ideally we want chaos res and regenerate life per second, as well as positive life. These belts are a little bit more difficult to come by sometimes. And then, like on this one right now, the cold and chaos res is not what we need. We would need cold res on this one, just straight cold res. And probably need a little bit more than just straight cold res to stay at cold res cap. That's close enough. You're at 83% res with a 35% crafted. You could potentially get 2% more cold res somewhere else, or you can sacrifice a dex node on your tree if you have enough dex to tattoo a little bit of cold res on. But your belt is going to come with life, regeneration, and resistances on it to help us maintain our righteous fire. On our hypnotic eye jewel, we obviously want life requires to have a void being shocked at least 41%. And then like cast speed and spell damage, although spell fire damage would do absolutely nothing because we cannot do fire damage on the build. So this little guy right here, sorry buddy, you got to be lightning damage if you want to be useful. So that would be the ideal little jewel right there. Now for our flask, we are using a diamond crit flask, we are using a sapphire regen flask, a granite armor flask, and a silver damage taken from which leeched his life flask. The suffixes can be mixed up any way you want. If you have a diamond flask with armor, you just need a granite flask with crit. We are running a life flask with more life when used on low life, and recover an additional amount of the life over 10 seconds when used while not on full life. This is really a good node to have the additional life over 10 seconds. Tremendous additional defensive layer that pairs really, really well with Petrified Blood. We are running an Ul graft with 15% increased max life and then whatever else you want on it. And we're running a Storming graft with crit strike chance against shocked enemies. And Radiant Ground gives us additional damage as well as ideally a level 34 Wreathed in Light. A lighten meaning is increased lightning damage. If you feel like your damage is too high, you could switch this over to max life. We have a Sublime Vision with Purity of Ice. Make sure you do get a minimum of 26% increased effect. Ideally, a little bit more. That way, you can cover your resistances without needing a jewel for it. On our large cluster, we do want a Doryani's Overshock Thunderstruck. There's not a lot of options there. Impossible Escape on Ghost Dance so that we can take advantage of our additional recoup nodes. You need a Glorious Vanity, which you can find in the spreadsheet here. Just click Find Timeless Jewel. You'll have nodes in here. You'll hit Search, and then you'll just take one from the list. Now, do note, this 3146 happens to also have aura effect, which is why my Sublime is a lower percentage, because I don't need the higher percentage Sublime in order to keep my build together. The build is pretty cheap to put together, with Sublime being the most expensive piece at around 20 to 25 div right now. But on our Sublime Vision, if you don't have that aura effect node, you are going to need to amp this up to like 31 or 32%, something like that, in order to get the amount of aura effect that you need for Purity of Ice to give you the additional resistances that you need. You'll see your aura effect is right in here. We need at least 140% aura effect, I believe, in order for the 5 to become 7. Yeah, so a minimum of 140% aura effect total right here. Now, for the remainder of our items, we have a Jewel generic DPS. Trade for these items, search for Jewel, very, very simple. Then we have a Storm Shroud for avoidance to elemental elements. We have an Unnatural Instinct that we're going to need in order to pair well with the Light of Meaning. So we have this overlap here where all of these nodes right here still give us lightning damage, even though they're not allocated, because of Light of Meaning right here. And then we have a Thread of Hope that we're going to use up here in order to pick up Breath of Lightning, Heart of Thunder, our life nodes, and our Golem Commander here. And then finally a Watcher's Eye with 20% fire and lightning damage taken as cold while affected by Purity of Ice. To go over our defensive layer, we are ignoring fire res and negativing cold lightning res, and then we're dumping everything to cold res. We do that through Glorious Vanity Divine Flesh doing 50% of the damage, Watcher's Eye doing 20% of the damage, and then our Sublime doing 30% of the damage. So all of our elemental is split between cold and chaos. For our ascendancy nodes, we are running Liege of the Primordial for golem support. We're running Shaper of Winter for defenses, Mastermind of Discord for damage, and Convergence for damage. Obviously, Convergence is only damage against a unique enemy, so if you feel like your unique boss DPS is high enough, you could come over into Bastion of Elements for more defenses. Shaper of Flames does not work with Doryani, otherwise we would love to run that. And then Shaper of Storms isn't really necessary. We hit hard enough shocks on the targets anyway. But if your damage is a little lower and you need more DPS, you could move from Shaper of Winter over to Shaper of Storms for guaranteed higher shocks. For skills, we're going to be running Arc. You can include Vol Arc if it fits your budget. Power Charge on Critical for support is a requirement to allow us to maintain power charges on the build, which is very important. Either Awakened or regular Spell Echo, depending on your budget. Increased critical damage, Awakened added lightning damage, and Inspiration. The Awakened added lightning damage is relatively cheap, but Awakened Spell Echo is a little bit more expensive. For Petrified Blood, we are running Arrogance and Enlighten. We talked about how you absolutely need Replica Dragon's Flight to have increased reservation efficiency so that you can overleech with your unreserved life. It is also very important that this is at least a 21 Arrogance, depending on the percentage. You can see as your level of Arrogance goes down, your ability to overleech does change, and then your Enlighten here. Now, if you have a smaller Dragon's Flight, you can run a level 4 Enlighten. That can help out with that. If you don't want to run Dragon's Flight and you want to run like a Simplex Amulet instead, you are going to need probably a level 4 or an Awakened Enlighten here in order to maintain that overleech. So do keep that in mind. We are running Cast when damage taken, either Immortal Call or Steel Skin here, whatever your preferred defensive guard is. We are running Purity of Ice with Arctic Armor and Vol Cold Snap. And then your choice of either Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion or Righteous Fire. Your choice depends on what you can maintain. If you do not have the net life recovery for Righteous Fire to feel comfortable, if you run Arcane Devotion instead, you'll see it deals much less damage to you, but also has less DPS. Righteous Fire itself is going to be 150 mil DPS, and then Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion 134. So it is your choice of these two to run. Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion is more cast speed, which is more frost blinks per second, so faster mobility and faster casting for clear, whereas Righteous Fire itself is strictly just more damage. For our golems, we're running Flame, Stone, Lightning, and Ice. On the off chance that you cannot fix your Chaos Reservation and you don't want to run an Amethyst Flask, you can give up this Ice Golem, which is the lowest DPS of your DPS golems here, and instead run a Chaos Golem, or you could give up your Stone Golem if you don't need the regen and run a Chaos Golem instead. For mobility, we are running Frostblink and Wintry Blast with Spell Echo and faster casting, as well as a Herald of Thunder. Herald of Thunder doesn't have to be linked. This is just some additional damage while we're mapping. And then finally, we do have a self-cast on Punishment. This allows us to do a tremendous amount of extra boss damage. I did get lazy in my build and just stick it on cast when damage taken. You can do that as well. And then Aspect of the Spider, which allows us to get stacks of spider webs, which is a tremendous amount of damage increase as well. For our passive tree, one thing to note, we are taking Recoup here. We are Impossible Escaping to Recoup here, and we are taking Recoup here. These are absolute requirements for the build. You'll notice our defenses don't really look that good on paper. They don't look that good on paper because POB doesn't do a really good job of depicting how strong damage Recoup is. Our effective health pull while we're fighting and we have Leech going is effectively infinite. You're not going to die to anything that can't one-shot you because we are over-capping our Recoup and we have a tremendous amount of recovery. So these defenses are not really indicative of what you're going to feel like playing in the game. That is important that you get all of these Recoup nodes, and you have Recoup on your rings, and you have life Recoup occurs over 3 seconds instead of 4 seconds. Allows us to over Recoup, so as soon as we start getting hit, we're healing for more damage than we're taking, which makes us incredibly tanky. Now, outside of that, we are taking Pain Attunement as well because we are a low life build. Your Timeless Jewel needs to go down here so you can get access to these two nodes for additional damage, as well as this one up here for additional damage. And then we're taking life literally every single place that we can get life on the build. If you have more than enough damage, you can even dump damage off of your tree node right here and go and take more life on Tireless here. Life is very important for the build because we need to make sure that we're not one-shot. And so that's what matters. As long as we are not getting one-shot, we're fine on recovery. And so that's what you want to focus on, is just getting your life total up as high as possible. Ideally 4 to 5k on your total life when you're getting the build put together. We're going across the center here for our Unnatural Instinct and our Light of Meaning. We are getting Corrupted Blood down here so that we can use a really good DPS jewel. If you've got a really good DPS jewel with Corrupted Blood immunity on it already, you can obviously drop this node, go somewhere else. We are taking Power Charge and Endurance Charge here, and a Power Charge up here as well. And then our Large Cluster Jewel with Overshock and Doryani's Lesson is coming up here. This 4% increase in max mana really doesn't do anything, but there's not another place to put it on the tree without losing something. Thunderstruck is also a tremendously good DPS increase, especially if you are under crit cap. So this becomes an alternative place you can go to for some additional damage on the build. Now, the passive tree is pretty fixed, and you can play this build at a lower level. You would simply give up life nodes or damage nodes off of the tree. So you have 3 damage nodes here you can give up off the tree. You have 3 damage nodes up here you can give up off the tree, and you've got a lot of life nodes that you can give up off the tree. I would say comfortably the build probably comes on at 84. No, we really don't have any need for the level 84 items. And so we're really limited by the level of the uniques, which is not too bad. So comfortably, the build could probably come on at level 67. You could probably put all of this together at level 67 and be very, very comfortable with it. You'll just have less damage and less life, obviously. You can not run the Petrified Blood combo if your life total is very low. That would be sufficient. Like if you're stuck at 3k life, you're probably better off just not running the Petrified Blood at all. So that becomes an option as well. Now, as far as the character that I put together, you'll notice I don't do everything exactly the same because don't necessarily have access to the same gear that's available since I didn't craft all of this. Like, these wands are just generic wands that I bought. The second one we did craft on, we just got unlucky with the lightning aug and got a low tier lightning damage. But you want a wand like that. Again, same Sandstorm Visage, same Doryani's prototype. On the gloves, we did something a little bit different, and I did not need the stats on the glove. And so I went with Aspect of the Spider and increased cast speed while focused, Unveil, which gives me a tremendous amount of damage while focused. And then on our greaves down here, I only needed a dexterity on it. And the reason is because I got amethyst ring that had massive strength as well as lightning res and damage recoup. So you can find a lot of these really good mirrored rings. I think I paid a div, maybe 2 divs for this ring. Replica Dragon's Flight, obviously with good increased efficiency of skills. We got a Stygian Vice here. I couldn't get one with resistances on it that had a Hunter Slam that was successful. So we got this one that just has no regen but good resistances and got a Hunter Slam for additional life. Hypnotic Eye Jewel, we just got mana on there because I couldn't find with lightning damage to spells. And then our flasks down here, I'm running a Progenesis flask as an alternative for some additional defenses instead of running a life flask, but these are very expensive, so you don't have to get this. And I did the video without the Progenesis flasks for most of the videos, or most of the gameplay. I just used this for my own personal use. And then a Hardening Old Graft for the Fizz reduction and max life, and then a Storming with the crit and the Radiant Ground. Outside of that, all the other items in here are exactly like they are in the POB. And so not a lot of changes, just a few small ones with the rares because of what we had available to us. Now, if you have any questions over this build, come by Twitch, drop a comment on YouTube. I'm happy to answer questions. Thank y'all very much for watching. Y'all have a wonderful day. Peace.